the crucifixion of Jesus and why he was on a square cross, connecting to the fifth element again, and the four letters above his head,
Is the
representing four lower states. He's ready to transcend to the higher state, or the pharaoh sitting on the four square cube, being himself the meta-human or the fifth element, you see. But the problem is that there's a division within the occult schools between those people, and they're all occultists. But the sorcerers believe that you have to co-opt technology. This is what is the birth of all of this nonsense. That in some way technology, right, in a some sort of unison with biology, genetics. That's what this whole genome project is really all about. And by the way, that's why they continually use the symbol of the serpent. Right, on the medical corporations and on all of these genome projects, the serpent is appearing over and over again because these sorcerers are part of a dragon court. They're part of the Brotherhood of the Snake. They've been working on this for thousands of years, certainly hundreds and hundreds of years they've been working on this. And then you have the other school of other occultists who go, no, no, no. The power that oversees man's transcendence is purely natural. And therefore it is a complete yogic unison with the forces of nature as they are, letting nature be your guide in a much different way. It's almost like you could say Nuth and Hadith. Aleister Crowley used the terms Nuth and Hadith to represent these opposing factions. Blake used the term prolific and devouring. In the tarot cards, you have the 7th and 8th card representing these two dichotomies. One is tantric, the other is ascetic. One is the path of ecstasy, right? The crooked road, and the other is the straight, formal, rigid road. We have it in our brains when we talk about left and right hemisphere. You have yin and you have yang. There's many, many modalities. The nagual and the tonal. You have so many ways of giving language to this particular dichotomy. Two approaches to the same gnosis. And we're in a race. This is what history has basically been. I'm not a Hegelian, but I can certainly say that you can look into history, and in one way you can absolutely see this. It's like art and physics, perhaps is another way of expressing it. But again, it depends what school you're coming from. And it's the crooked road versus the straight road. It's the path of the magician as opposed to the path of the mystic. The path of the arrow as opposed to the path of the serpent. There's so many different ways to language this. And you'll find this in all the metaphors of life. All the myths and legends speak about this. If you use this as a metaphor, you'll see it. It's all through astrology, it's all through tarot, it's all through mythology. You can find it in the story of King Arthur and Robin Hood, Merlin. I mean, whatever myth you go to, you'll find this metaphor. And each individual in the world today is polarized by that decision that they make. And that doesn't mean that it can't change. If you listen to the song Stairway to Heaven, he says there are two roads you can go on, but you can change the road if you so desire. So there's people who will take one road, who will flip over and go, look, I'm done with this, I want to try the other road. But basically they represent this model of the ascetic life, which is rigid and fixed and masculine and acquisitive and phallocentric and ultimately patriarchal and even hierarchical. And then on the other side, you have the holarchic model, which is feminine and yin and tantric. And I've always seen that this is very accurate in life. And people fall into these categories. And the technological side can be used by both. See, even the tantric side, the yin side, is fine with technology. It's just that, again, it's how you're using the wand, right? It's how you're using the knife and fork. You may have a gun. It depends what you're using it for. You can either use it to defend yourself or you can use it to go around killing people. So don't blame the technology. It's just that something has happened in the school of these sorcerers where they really are looking to find that bridge between the world, between the silicon, the technical, and the biological. And the computer is part of the step on that way of arriving at that place. And there's many other things that they're up to. But unfortunately, in my research, I'm not into that because I found out that a lot of really dark things are involved in this. Many, many, many dark things are involved in this particular progress. And ultimately, it's doomed to failure. And the Blavatskys warned about this, that other great civilizations had crumbled because of this. And that you can't tamper with nature's laws. You have to be obedient to nature's ordinances. You can't be like a mad child running around doing what you want, because that has severe consequences. That was picked up in the metaphor Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. The idea of that. And by the way, I just remembered the name of the first woman who created the Gothic genre. Her name was Anne Radcliffe. She was one woman who didn't have to write under a pseudonym, but anyway, that's besides the point. The point going back is that the Frankenstein mythology is about this technological idea that you can live forever, have all sorts of powers, cure disease. Well, you don't even realize why disease exists, but you want to cure it? I mean, hey, what happens if there's actually a reason for disease? You see, so there's all these metaphysical and philosophical points that these guys never think about, but they're always wanting to put earrings on the Mona Lisa and fix what isn't broken, you know?
Let me ask you this. Is the God particle the same as the fifth element?
It's a metaphor for it, I would say. I'm not totally up to speed on it, but I do know that ideologically, all these things that these people are doing, they think of themselves as the new Templars, as the new saints, as the people who are going to open all sorts of magical doors for us through science. They're possessed by this idea. Yeah, they're sort of like possessed by it. But what they don't realize is that there's some very, very brilliant things that will come of that. It's not altogether a bad idea. But at the same time, if you take it too far, there's dangers as well. Because the hierarchical model is ultimately, if taken to extremes, completely psychopathic. As the other side, the tantric side, if taken to extremes, becomes pure debauchery. Becomes irrational. It has its own downfalls, you see. So in some way, there has to be some sort of blending or balance. And again, that's what we were talking about earlier, about very ambivalent things, needing to be balanced. I mean, there's nothing we can do about it. There is only male and there's only female. For some strange reason, we've come into this world, and there are these dichotomies, there are these antipodes, or antinomonies, or whatever you want to call it. And there they are. We have some sort of balancing act to do. And technology, I think, is all about who's using it and what for. But when it's combined with this power drive, this sick power drive to gain power over the world, and ultimately I do believe that the people behind us are sociopaths, they're completely sick psychopaths who have no inner order. And therefore, the person who has no inner structure or inner order will have this particular drive to have external order imposed upon them, in the same way that you have stabilizers on a paraplegic, so that you can walk. They need this outer shell, this armoring, because they have actually no inner psychological order. And that's why you keep hearing them talking about order, is because they're the most disorganized people. And I can prove it because I've gone to their sources and I found their own quotes about life and reality and all sorts of things, and they're crazy. This was brought out very strongly in the Doctor Strangelove movie, in that bizarre scene which Robert Ryan played to perfection, where he's ranting on about women and semen and enemies and all of this stuff. Is beautifully portrayed in the hard-bodied, masculine, acquisitive, ultimately violent, and ultimately self-sadistic, self-destructive, you see, personality type. There's various different terms for this. Eric Fromm used the term necrophilic in the true meaning of that word, lovers of death. But he went on to say that just when I say necrophilia and I say love of death, I don't mean sewers. I don't mean feces and toilets. I mean the sterile buildings, the laboratories, the super clean cities, the super clean Track 29 gardens. There can be a deathly sterility, which is what our societies are also become. That kind of morbid, necrophiliac mindset is found in our shopping malls, for goodness sake. In the squareness and the roboticness and the regimentation. That is more deadly than anything else.
Because it is regimented, because it's a collectivism that you were talking about. How everything has to be the same, everything has to be perfect. They're control freaks. These people are that you talk about that are psychopathic and sociopathic. They're control freaks, and so they have such turmoil going on in their own minds that they project a control freak attitude about everything else that's right. External.
That's brilliant, and it's brilliantly put out in certain films that show you this incredibly. And I lost the trail of what. It ties into what we were saying earlier on about that. Remember, we said find out what is false.
Yeah.
And become familiar with that. That's a help in many ways. When people learn what are the hallmarks of the anti-truth, the pseudo-truth, one of them is this collectivism. So you've got a rule of thumb. Look around, and whatever you see it bears this extreme collectivism, that's already your pointer. You've already learned something now.